with myself. I'm kind of an unusual transplant. My mother was born in Switzerland. My father was born in New Zealand. Io ho sempre parlato italiano da piccolo, inglese è la mia seconda lingua. English is my second language, and I'm a first-generation American citizen, born to green card-carrying parents. And of all the places, Switzerland, New Zealand, two of the most beautiful countries in the world, arguably peaceful. Where was I born? 10 minutes outside of New York City in New Jersey. But I can run a trot line and I can skin a buck. So, long story short, I started my first teaching job. I got a BS in biology from Lehigh, a MS in education from University of Pennsylvania, and then I got a research science master's at Virginia Tech. And that's where I fell in love with this area. And I should have gone off here or there doing research or environmental assessment and pollution and all that stuff. But I liked it so much here, the Appalachian Mountains and the New River, that I stayed. And my first teaching job was at Shawsville High School, the old Shawsville High School, in 1984. From there I went to Radford High School, where I coached indoor track, outdoor track, cross country, soccer, basketball, drove the school bus, did all that stuff, and taught biology until I was been involved in Radford High School for almost 40 years, and I finally cut the last string. Last year I didn't sub, I didn't tutor, I didn't volunteer, so I'm living that good life right now. But it was hard to get here. So my connection with Floyd, I bought, I'm an outdoor kind of guy. When I turned 60, my goal was to hike all of Virginia's 540 miles of the Appalachian Trail. And off and on, I section hiked and rehab between surgery. But I hiked all of Virginia's 540 miles of the Appalachian Trail, which was really tremendous. And I feel like I know Virginia really well now, very intimately. I bought 18 acres of Floyd, and it was just, I had a little stream on the property. One thing led to another, and I cleared a space in a grove of tulip poplars with a chainsaw to put in a pond, and I hand peeled the bark on those logs, and I built myself a real live log cabin. Just a one-room job. It may show up in the background in some of my videos I share today. My topic today is tying in with the salamanders. And I chose that I cover everything. In fact, so I got to tell you how the channel started. So when the governor of Virginia closed schools because of COVID, us teachers and the kids were like, what the heck just happened? Remember they said we're going to close for 5 days, and then it just blew up from there. It was such a crazy time in our lives. And so in the first week, one of my colleagues said to me, Frank, she said, you're depressed. The kids are all, don't know what's going on. I've been teaching at the school for 30 years by that point. So he said, why don't you get on Facebook or, and reach out to the kids and talk to them about something. Talk to them about something you love. And so I did a live Facebook broadcast from my backyard in Floyd. I live about 5 miles from the bakery on Route 8. And I found a fleabane plant. And so I started talking about this fleabane that was in my backyard, just outside my door. I talked about how early settlers used fleabane because they believed that it would keep fleas out of things, and you could stuff it in your straw tick, and you even made brooms with it and put the fleabane in. in the broom part to sweep out your cabin and stuff. So I talked about the biology and the culture and the history. I was always multidisciplinary, trying to bring in, a sense of place and stuff. And people say, "Hey, Frank, that was really good." And I was like, "It was?" And they go, "No, yeah, it was really good." I go, "Oh." They said, "You need to put it on YouTube." And I was like, "I'm not putting it on YouTube." The only time I'd ever seen a YouTube video was when I had to replace an alternator in a 73. And that was the only time I used it. So I got dragged into it kicking and screaming. And I thought, well, I'll do these biology videos, on things that kids can find in their yard. Because I'm all about connecting people with the outdoors, connecting people with nature. And it's sort of a contradiction because I want kids to spend less screen time. And here I am doing YouTube videos. but I'm hoping to inspire kids to go out and find these things and show them how cool they are. And I thought 20, 30 kids might watch it. Well, now, as Glenn pointed out, I'm at 10 million views, 86,000 subscribers. I'm seen in 50 countries around the world. I regularly, even though I have 10 million views, I reply to every comment on my channel on any video. And sometimes I have to translate from different languages and stuff like that. And it's been really exciting that I've expanded my teaching from the 4 concrete, block walls to this worldwide outreach with this thing. Now the kids are telling me, "Mr. Taylor, if you really want to grow your channel, you got to get on TikTok." And now I'm doing no TikTok stuff. So that's where we are. One of the important things in my teaching was sense of place. And I would ask kids, I'd say, "Hey, Johnny," I said, "Where do you live?" And he'd go, 122 12th Street. I said, No. Where do you live?" "Oh, no, I live in Rent." And what the response I wanted the kids to get me, which I drilled into them, and I surprise them every couple of weeks and ask this question. When I ask, "Where do you live?" one of the kids to reply and say, "I live in the Appalachian Mountains. We're the most diverse ecosystems in the world." Kids, a lot of kids, I'm probably preaching to the choir here, because I feel that you're here, you have a great sense of place, you have a great sense of where you live and the biodiversity and the beauty of these mountains. We're coming down 221 here from Floyd, came over the rise, and this just opened up, and the mountain scene behind it, beautiful place, and again, I can live anywhere in the world too. People ask me why, Frank, you could live in Switzerland, New Zealand, or here or there. I could be a citizen of any of those countries. I love being here. I'm also a passionate deer hunter, so that's part of it. So here we are, and I wanted to emphasize that where we live is one of the most biodiverse ecosystems in the entire world. And we have in the Appalachian Mountains over 110 different species of trees. That's only second to the Amazon rainforest. That's only second to these equatorial rainforests and stuff. It's an incredible biodiversity of trees here, 110 different species. And a lot of that happens because of the orientation of the Appalachian Mountains and this north-south trend. So when the ice ages came down and the ice sheets pushed down into the south, they destroyed everything. There was no living things under that ice. Over Pennsylvania, it was 2-3 miles high. And down here, we're on the edge of that. So all the northern species got pushed down to the ends of the Appalachian Mountains. As the ice sheets receded, this became the Noah's Ark of all the species that were pushed out in that last ice age 10, 20,000 years ago. And these species started to return. But with our mountains, we have this great diversity of climate from low to high. And as you go, for example, if you walk in Grayson Highlands, in the base of Mount Rogers, you're in an oak hickory forest. And then as you move up, you're in a beech maple forest. And then as you get higher, you're in a spruce fir forest. And these spruce fir forests, perched on the tips of these mountains, are like biological islands. In Highland County, we have snowshoe hare. Did you know that we have? You know, in Mount Rogers, we have species of northern flying squirrels. So the Appalachian Mountains became this repository of all these different species because of the varied habitat and the climate change by these mountains, and the fact that the mountains ran north and south, so as those ice sheets receded, we had all these different species. So I cover everything on my channel, from snakes to birds and salamanders. And, I've got an extensive, you guys are into foraging mushrooms, I have an extensive mushroom playlist. I'm really kind of the old school classic naturalist from the 1800s, I suppose, here with my YouTube now. So I'm a jack of all trades and a master of none. So when Glenn asked me, you know, what would you like to speak about? I thought what I'd like to do is talk about salamanders, because they're kind of a indicator species of environmental quality, and they also illustrate the tremendous biodiversity that we have here in the Appalachian Mountains. And I pulled some facts here. I don't know if you know this, but the Appalachian Mountains are considered the salamander capital of the world. There are 77 species of salamanders in the state of Virginia alone. And there's only 550 species of salamanders worldwide. So we harbor almost 20-25% of all the different salamander species are here in the Appalachian Mountains. We have the highest concentration of salamander species on the earth. Southern Appalachians have more than 75 species. It's just an incredible species diversity here. So if you want to study salamanders, where would you go in the world? You would come here because of the species diversity. And we'll get into a little bit about why salamanders are such a great indicator of environmental quality, and it's because of their physical characteristics. And I'm going to, one of the focus points of this talk was going to be on the eastern spotted newt, which is this one right here, and my mascot of my channel is the most unique. There's no other salamander in the whole world that has a life history like this one, and it's really special and really complicated. But what I want to start with is the redback salamander. And hang on, I don't know if I got the sound right here yet. Okay, this is me making money. So, the redback salamander, probably one of the most common salamanders here in Virginia. Its numbers are staggering, and we'll get into some of the details on that. But the other one I want to bring that up is because this is the salamander, this is the thing, this is the event that hooked me into biology and biology teaching for the whole rest of my life. And when I was living in New Jersey, I remember picking up a trash can outside and finding my first salamander underneath it when I was about 4 or 5 years old. And I was completely enamored with this amazing little creature. And that's why I'm in biology today. And it's all tied back to that. So what I'd like to do is show this, what I'll do is get this video running, and then I'm going to stop and pause and talk about some things in it, because I have these resources, so I thought that would be a good way to do it.
Can you turn on closed captioning?
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect.
Did you go on lizards growing up?
I actually learned about salamanders.
I learned that pretty
The
fast.
last science class I ever had taught me biology too. I still remember the mayfly. You took us to the stream. You were the last science class I enjoyed. It was amazing. This is surreal.
Oh my God, this is surreal for me too. Oh wow. What year?
Wow. I'm trying to think back. Was that 2005?
Your name?
I'm at Montrese Merritt. That was
Oh,
my,
yeah.
the Merritt family.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I had a lot of merits.
They were smart.
Yeah. Wow. That's it. Can we turn off the lights? And can you guys see okay over there? Do you want to move your chairs or, you know?
Lights.
All right, let's see how this works.
The volume is on the side of the remote.
Today's episode right outside my door, literally under a flower pot. This episode is about the amazing redback salamander, my most favorite salamander, and probably the organism that I found at 4 or 5 years old that had me so captivated that it led me to a career in biology and biology education. Today's episode is about the redback salamander. At the end, I'm going to tell you why I call it the king of the forest. And I think you'll agree too. It's a fascinating creature. It's a lungless salamander. I'm going to talk about how to identify it, how to find it, polymorphism, and some amazing things about its biology. And though it's an amphibian, it has a completely different life cycle than any other amphibian. So stay tuned. The redback salamander's coming right up. Right here in your backyard. You never know what you're going to find. So I'm here in an ideal habitat for the eastern redback salamander, this deciduous woodland that has lots of lonely, thick leaf litter for it to hide in, lots of logs and rocks for it to hide underneath, and it's a great place to find them. Let's talk scientific name. You know, I love Rick.
So this is basically my backyard. I'm probably a couple hundred feet from my house. Typical woodland in Floyd County. I live on Weeks Road off of Ridgeview Road, about 5 miles from the bakery on Route 8. So this is very typical habitat you can find anywhere around here.
Is it like November?
Actually, don't remember.
And the scientific name. So the scientific name of the redback salamander is Plethodon cinereus. The word plethodon comes from the Greek. Let's break that down. The first part is from plethora, meaning many, and odon refers to teeth. So it has many teeth. And in fact, if you microscopically look inside the mouth of this salamander, you will find many teeth on the inside of its mouth. The species name, cinereus, refers to ash color, which refers to the leadback phase, which I'm going to talk about in a second. The easiest way to identify a redback salamander is, of course, by seeing this very distinctive red back going down the back of this animal. And of course, that's where its name comes from. However, this salamander is polymorphic. Polymorphic means that it can occur in poly, many different morphs, or many different color patterns. So this one is a redback, but they'll also come in a leadback phase. And in the redback phase, sometimes they'll vary from orange to yellow to even white for the main color of that stripe on its back. So don't be deceived. You may have a redback salamander and it won't have a red back. The other thing to look for is these very small feet, very large eyes. There are 5 toes on the rear feet, 4 toes on the front feet. If you turn them over and look at their bellies, they kind of have a whitish, kind of salt and pepper kind of look to the underbelly. If you really get up close, you can count costal grooves. These costal grooves are a lot like ribs. They're not true ribs, but they're marked like they have on their sides. And if you count them, you'll find the redback salamanders generally have between 16 and 19 costal grooves. Their favorite habitat, of course, is this woodland. And I engaged biology and nature when I was a kid. And my earliest memories are going out in the woods, turning over rocks and logs and finding these fascinating little creatures. And not only can you find them in little woodlands, but you can find them around your house. So sometimes you really don't have to go far to see nature. And nature really is right outside your door. So this is where I found the redback salamander. Maybe decide to do this episode for you today. This is a great habitat for salamanders. And this is a great way to find redback salamanders around your house. And you can see underneath, it's a great place for these guys to live. It's got shade, moisture, because these plants are watered very frequently, lots of food. You can see that under here, there are arthropods, there are roly-polies or isopods, there's slugs, there's all kinds of great stuff for them to eat under these things. So a good place to find redback salamanders is around your house under things that are giving them protection and cover and food. Here's another spot I can frequently find salamanders, under this storage container. I'll lift that up. We'll take a look underneath. And under here, there's often crickets and spiders and worms and salamanders, another great habitat. These salamanders are far more common than people realize because of their secretive nature. And why do they have this secretive nature? Because they're lungless salamanders. They have no lungs and they breathe through their skin.
So one of the things that surprises a lot of people is that many of the salamander species have no lungs at all. And so in order to breathe, they have to breathe through their skin. Now, if they're going to breathe through their skin, that has to be an active biological membrane that can transpose oxygen from the air into their skin. So why are salamanders such a good indicator of environmental quality? Well, they're on the cutting edge of that. They have this thin skin that has to allow oxygen to pass through for this organism to survive. So with that thin skin, it's susceptible and sensitive to all kinds of chemicals and things in the environment. And so when salamanders are often the first indication that something bad is happening. Because when and worldwide, the amphibian population is going like this. You know, I'm sure you're all well aware of that. So being lungless, they are so sensitive to environmental changes. And so that's why so many of the amphibians are fantastic indicator species of environmental quality. And so if you go into a woodland or you go in a stream, there's no salamanders there. That's an indicator that something is going on. And they will indicate that environmental impact long before anything else or anyone is aware. So they're really fascinating in that way. In order to, and I need to say, I'm an advocate of getting kids outside and turning over rocks and interacting with the environment. And I get trolled sometimes from some of the extreme people who say you should never touch a salamander, you should have nitrile gloves on because oils in your skin, or if you have hand lotion on. So I do take precautions myself when I go out. I rinse my hands a lot, so there's no soap or detergent or anything on there. If I'm working with a salamander, photographing and stuff, I always have a bucket of water and dip my hands in the water so that they're wet and stuff like that. But I believe that in order to make changes at political level, national level, local level, people have to feel connected with the environment. People have to have real emotional connections. You can't just read people facts and stuff. And so I want kids going out and picking up a frog and holding it in their hands and seeing that magic, when you contact it. But like I said, I get, other people say, oh no, there should be zero intervention, blah, blah, blah. But I think the value of that far exceeds any, I think, very small impact that you might have.
Breathe through the skin. The skin must be substantially porous, and it needs to be kept moist. So these salamanders only come out when the humidity is high, when temperatures are cool. You don't see them out during the day. They're often nocturnal and often most active before or during or just after it rains. Because they're lungless and they have this very sensitive skin, it's really important when you pick one up to wet your hands first, or if you don't have water close by, cover them with soil, rub dirt on your hands, or pick up the salamander with some dirt. So picking them up with water or some soil will protect them not only from drying out, but from skin oils, detergents, or lotions that you might have on your skin that can be quickly absorbed and have a negative effect on the salamander. Another amazing fact about these organisms is that these salamanders are actually very territorial. They'll leave pheromones and dung piles and mark out their territories that they'll actually defend from other salamanders. The other crazy thing.
So the salamander biology is far, far more complex than you would ever imagine. Just like, wildlife, a fox or a raccoon, they mark out their territory, they have pheromones, they fight over their territory. So there's this whole world of stuff going on out there underneath this leaf litter that we are completely unaware of. It's really fascinating.
The redback salamander is in fact wild amphibian. And stereotypically, we think of amphibians as laying eggs in water, having a gilled stage like a newt or a tadpole, and then changing in or morphing into a gilled terrestrial stage. Well, the redback salamander is 100% terrestrial. It doesn't lay its eggs in water.
So redback salamanders are amphibians. And when you think of amphibians, the frog is a classic example. Adult frogs go to the pond, mate, lay eggs in water. The eggs hatch out into a gilled larva. The gilled larva mature and undergo a metamorphosis and become a frog. So most salamanders follow that same pattern. The salamanders lay their eggs in the water. The egg hatches out. You have a gilled larva for a year or up to sometimes 3 years. Then they metamorphosize, lose their gills, and become a terrestrial salamander. And they live in the terrestrial environment until they return to lay eggs in the water. But the redback salamander, and this is why I could find it under a garbage can in New Jersey, is they've adapted to being 100% terrestrial. They don't need the stream or water or a pond to lay eggs to continue their life cycle.
It will lay 3 to 15 eggs underneath a leaf or a log or a rock where the humidity is very reliable. The female will actually stay with them and curl up around them and protect them. And when the eggs begin to mature, the larvae actually go through their gilled stage inside the egg. And when they first hatch out, they have gills for about a day until they fade away.
So and again, the complexity of behaviors, it's such a simple little thing. The mother protects the eggs that she laid. And she'll lay 10 or 15 eggs under a rock. And you may have found these in your yard or your garden at some point. You turn over a rock, you go, oh, what are these eggs doing here? They possibly could have been redback salamander eggs. So the redback salamander, when it hatches, first hatches inside the egg, inside this watery environment, and it has gills. And so it lives and matures in its gill stage inside that egg, and of course in a place that has a very moist environment and has to be consistent through the whole time. And then when they hatch out, they have some residual gills that go away. So they're completely adapted terrestrially. Now, as I'm talking to you about the salamanders and their need, their wet skin, all that kind of stuff, you know, I think about forestry here in our mountains. And when I see a clear cut, you know, it's ugly looking, you know, and that's of course your first reaction. But the salamanders populations are severely impacted by these clear-cut forestry operations. And you know, there's a balance, because you know, forestry is a major industry in the Appalachians, and a good reason to live here, and provides income. And there's, you know, I feel always a balance between protecting the environment and also people living in these beautiful places. And how do we be blessed to live in an area like this? We have to have some kind of employment, and renewable industries are good things. But for me, from the perspective of the salamanders alone, I would like to see more selective cutting and not clear cutting, so that we leave islands for the year. Because there's scientists are doing studies that, you know, when they clear 100 acres and they look at how many years does it take for the salamander populations, you know, to return that, it can be very staggering in some places. So there's always concerns.
Fascinating life history of this amphibian that's really made it to a terrestrial life cycle. So let's get to the heart of the matter. Why do I call this diminutive, unassuming, seemingly gentle little salamander the king of the forest? Well, it's because of its abundance. This is possibly the most numerous predator in the entire forest. They can occur in enormous numbers. Their biomass, and totaled up, will exceed the biomass of all other vertebrates. You add up the mass or weight of the squirrels and deer and bobcats and bears and all the other vertebrate animals in the forest, and measure that weight and compare it to the same weight of salamanders in that same area, and the mass of the salamanders is going to exceed all those other things.
This is a really staggering fact, and when I first started reading about this and listening to this, I was like, no, there's no way. Well, the salamanders they have documented up to 10,000 salamanders per acre in deciduous forest here in the Appalachians. 10,000 salamanders per acre. I don't know about you, but I'm lucky if I can find 2 or 3 salamanders when I go out, you know, for a couple hours. You know, we underestimate the leaf litter on top of the soil, all the different vertebrates and animals, and mice, and voles, and moles, and worms that are tunneling through there. And all this, probably in the first 12 to 18 inches of our soil, is this tremendous underground network of organisms. And you know, in that are all the organisms that decay. You know, when a tree falls down and a branch falls down, and our fall leaves fall down every year. There's a myriad of organisms, from bacteria to fungi to insects, and tiny little animals that are processing all that and are constantly turning everything over. One of the studies, and I think I'm going to talk about it here, was done right here at Mountain Lake on these salamanders. So by both numbers
and mass, they outrank all other vertebrates in the forest. Salamanders, therefore, have a giant impact on the food chain and energy turnover. And salamanders will be regulating the populations of all the forest leaf litter insects and invertebrates, regulating that population. In turn, they're taking that biomass of the insect and invertebrate population and changing it into food. So many things feed on these salamanders as well. So they play this giant role in the food chain. That's why I call them the king of the forest. So here in Virginia, at the Mountain Lake Biological Station, just about 30 miles away from me, they did a study on salamander populations and abundance. What they found was, in this 2002 study, that there are 3 salamanders per square meter of forest. What does that translate up to? Well, that's 3 million salamanders in a square kilometer. Just a phenomenal number, phenomenal biomass of salamanders.
While I was to try to digest it, it's like a whole different way of thinking about the forest and what's under your feet there. They find 3 salamanders every square meter, and in a square kilometer, that totaled up to 3 million salamanders. It's staggering, and so these salamanders play this giant role in regulating all the soil, forest, biochemical, geochemical pathways and biology. And in turn, they're eating this stuff, and they're big enough to be eaten by snakes and frogs and birds, and anything else. And then there's a whole other story behind that, because a lot of salamanders develop toxicity, and we'll talk about that when we talk about the red F that seems to walk around with impunity, advertising this bright orange color. And unlike the redback salamander, which is always hidden, these guys are walking around on the forest floor. And two years ago, I was walking around on my property with the grandkids. It was, we had a drought, and then we had 3 days of thunderstorms, and we couldn't walk down the trail without watching to make sure we didn't step on a red eft. There are hundreds and thousands that suddenly emerge from nowhere. It was absolutely staggering. Are you guys having fun? Is this good?
Yes.
And I'm sorry, I'm probably acting like I don't want to have any questions. Can I pause a minute? Do you have any questions about what you've seen far, or comments, or do you believe I mean, I almost feel like nobody's going to believe this stuff about salamanders. Come on, that's like too much. Yes.
When you're talking about the growth metamorphosis as an egg, and they have their juvenile stage, and you say they hatch, is it like a double layer egg? Like, so they develop and then they are like within a little liquid casing?
So the embryo is suspended in the fluid, just like the human embryo is suspended in the amniotic sac with fluid all the way around. And when a human is birthed, that sac breaks and fluid leaves. So the salamanders are inside, the embryo is floating inside that circle of fluid, and it develops and grows until it's probably on the edges of that.
And then that's what, so it has gills or that
It has
stage.
gills at that stage.
And then when the actual thing hatches, the gills
It
just,
still has the gills, but they kind of disappear within the first month or two. I love sharing about the salamanders. So cool.
These salamanders, including redback salamanders, might be the most underappreciated part of ecological and wildlife studies and looking at the balance of ecosystems. They play a crucial role. And because of their numbers and their biomass, that's why I call them the king of the forest. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Nature in Your Backyard. And just for the record, I am in Southwest Virginia in the Appalachian Mountains at about 2,700 feet. Today's November 15th. And as I was walking back up the hill to the house from filming, I turned over one last log. Sure enough, there are 3 salamanders right underneath it, all redback salamanders. So I hope you will go outside too and see what you can find. In my house, we've kind of created a amphibian habitat. You guys see my video on toads and the toad habitats we made. We have toads here that we see every night all summer long. And I hope I motivate you to go outside and look for stuff. It's really cool. And it's just amazing what you can find just outside your door. If you like what I do, please subscribe to my...
So, stop watching YouTube, go outside. my life contradiction, right? Have you found redback salamanders around your house?
Oh, yes.
Familiar with them? How many people have recognized the redback salamander? Okay. So curious thing. Those of you that don't, go out and turn over some rocks in your yard today. Question?
So if we move them, since they're territorial, because we found some under some wood that we were moving, so I kind of put them somewhere else I thought
Sure.
they would like. Is that a problem for them?
It's just being realistic. What are you going to stop, gardening or, I feel like they'll adapt. Different, I would like, I have some box turtle episodes, and that's more significant than
Right.
moving a salamander a few feet. A lot of people see box turtle on the road, and they go, "Oh man, this isn't a good place for this box turtle," and they take him away. And they say that if you'd like transplant a box turtle, it'll spend the rest of its life trying to get back to its home range. So it's great to rescue box turtles on the road. Look behind, don't stop. Don't put yourself at a risk of a collision. Try to determine which way the box turtle is going, and put them on that side of the road, and don't transplant them. Box turtles in Virginia, their population is in decline. There's actually an active smuggling pet trade. Box turtles are sold for a very high price around the world. And so box turtles are not a good animal to take home as a pet. It's great to see them. In fact, when I was a kid, I told you I was always into this. We had a box turtle in my backyard in suburban New Jersey, and I painted my name on it with enamel blue testers, like paint, to use plastic models and stuff like that. And I was doing a home range study, and people would find it and call my house. And finally, my mom and dad got so mad at me, they said, "You got to get that turtle back." And people would say, "I found your pet turtle." I said, no, just put him back outside. I just wanted to see where he's going. And my parents finally made me get the turtle and straighten my phone number off. I was always doing something. So, and then if you're interested, I have that just made me think of it. I have a really fun video of how to pick up a snapping turtle without losing a finger. Because a lot of times, we'll start seeing them again this spring and stuff. You might wonder how to get them off the road. And that's a fun video. And it almost takes my nose off, but that's another story. So let's get to the red aft. Okay, so the typical salamander life cycle is to lay eggs in water, go through a gill stage, and live in the water for a year or two, and then move on to the terrestrial stage, and then return to the water to lay eggs. And then there you got the redback salamander that has taken that, but moved it over to be completely terrestrial. Then we've got the eastern newt, which is probably the most visible salamander in Virginia and on the East Coast because of the biology and habits of this middle stage. But there's no other amphibian in the entire world that has such a complex life cycle. So, and I've got like 5 videos, or 6 or 10 on this. If you're interested in looking at my channel, I have like 500 videos now. I have like 5,000 friends on Facebook, and all my former students, and I get probably 2 or 3 Mr. Taylor, what is this questions every day. People find a snake, a turtle, an insect, a wasp, You know, they go, oh, what is this? What is this? And I love answering those things. But now I'm almost at a point where I can send them, every question I get, I can send them a video. So I've divided my channel into playlists, and I've got reptiles and amphibians and mushrooms and trees and spring wildflowers and meadow wildflowers, things like that. So you can look up that as a resource. Let's look at the red aft. This is my absolute favorite salamander. Every time I find it, at least one person already showed me a picture of their red aft on their phone. They're just so spectacular. It's, oh God. This is me making money. Which of these brands would you consider choosing? I'm a real cheap traveler.
Hi, this is Frank Taylor with Nature at Your Door. I'm here in essentially my backyard, just outside my door, here in the Appalachian Mountains in the forest at about 2,700 feet. Yesterday we had a drenching thunderstorm rain after days and weeks of drought and hot weather. And what came out of that was that these salamanders started moving around. This is the eastern newt, otherwise known, this stage is called the red eft. In today's episode, I'm going to focus on the red eft stage, which is very active throughout my property. I found at least a dozen out on the trails yesterday. So stay tuned to learn everything you need to know about the red eft stage of the eastern newt, otherwise known as the red spotted newt. Right here in Europe. So today I'm out looking for red efts, and I will frequently find them out on trails.
So again, this is like 75 feet from my house, a little Jeep trail going around the turn, and it's probably 800 yards from the nearest stream or water.
Just like this one right here. And you can see
this is real, this is not staged. I didn't like spend hours looking for this. I walked down the trail and there he was. Now, some of my videos where you see these tremendous close-ups of salamanders and stuff, my son came to visit me a few weeks ago, and he was just so disappointed because I for some of these things, and frogs and stuff, I have an artificial habitat that I make with rocks and boards and stuff like that, and I get some of my close-ups are from me wandering around on my belly in the woods, but a lot of them, I take the animal in and create a habitat and do it in studio filming. That's how I get some of these really, really good close-ups and stuff. It's reality.
he is right here on the trail. Beautiful bright orange color. Oh yeah, they're so amazing. And it's amazing how many one can find. Yesterday, when I was walking down this trail, just a couple hours after a thunderstorm, I found at least a dozen just laying out in the open like this. Isn't that fantastic? These are the coolest guys. One of the first things you notice when you pick these up is that they're different from other salamanders. Now this is the red F stage of the eastern newt, or the eastern.
Now, most salamanders, you pick them up and they feel slimy. In fact, I invite you to watch my video called I Got Slimed, where I picked up a slimy salamander, and they actually exhibit this characteristics overwhelmingly, and they secrete this slime when you pick them up as a defense mechanism against predation, and it'll take 4 or 5 days for you to wash that slime off your hand. Once it dries, it is like must be one of the strongest glues in the world. And I'll have dirt glued to my hand with this stuff, and literally it take 5-6 hand washings to get it, and you can't even get it off. Different from this terrestrial guy, you can see that his skin, you can see granules on it. He's not slimy at all. It's so unusual for an amphibian.
Red spotted newt, and they have those characteristic spots on their sides, and of course this bright yellow color
or orange or red, which varies in shades and in brightness. What makes them different from other salamanders is they're not slimy at all. In fact, these guys are pretty dry. And one of the reasons they can be like this and adapt so well to the terrestrial environment is that they have lungs. Keep in mind that the red F stage of the eastern newt is one of 3 life stages. They live 3 to 5 months as an aquatic larva, and then they...
So, I said the eastern spotted newt has the most unusual life history. So, eggs hatch in the spring. We'll start with the egg stage. And when they hatch out, you get this aquatic gilled larva that looks nothing like the red F and looks nothing like the adult. They're very drab in color, which helps them survive in the pond. They have to lay eggs in a pond and develop in a pond. And they'll live in this stage 3 to 5 months. It's born in the spring, maybe as early as March. And then by September, October, they're emerging from the pond and they leave the pond after a year.
Leave the pond, lose their gills, develop lungs, breathe air with their lungs, and live in the terrestrial environment for anywhere from 3 to 5 years, maybe as many as 7. So,
first of all, again, I have to point out that these guys are impossibly cute. But secondly, so they're a year in the water, living as a gill stage, and then they emerge and metamorphosize into this bright red, kind of scaly, dry skin, because unlike the dusky salamanders, the lungless salamanders, these guys actually have lungs and breathe air. And they live on the ground for up to 5 years. So 1 year in the water, 5 years on land. So you can also see that this is a long life cycle.
this terrestrial stage is called the red F. But you can see that their colors vary. After the 3 to 5 year or so period living as a terrestrial salamander, they will return to the pond. So once they return to the pond, they'll undergo another metamorphosis where they'll lose that reddish color, turn more darker green. They'll still have the spots on their slide. Their skin gets slimy and their tail will flatten, making them really fully aquatic, and they'll spend the rest of their life in the aquatic environment. They may live up to 12 to 15 years, and as adults, they'll breed in the late winter and early spring. I love these guys. I've got a number of different...
So, 1 year in the water as a gill stage, emerge from the water and leave the water and maybe travel even up to a mile or more. Sometimes I'll find, a red F and I'll think, oh my God, what would be the closest water source for this? They're really spread out foraging and stuff. 3 to 5 years on land, and then so their 6th or 7th year, they'll return to the water and metamorphosize again. And they lose the orange color. Their tail will elongate and flatten out. The males, their back legs will swell up. They become green on the top and have a bright yellow belly underneath. So they've gone through 2 metamorphoses in their life cycle. No other organism does this. So when you see these newts in your pond, and they'll come up, you'll see them, they're air breathers, right? And you'll see them come up and breathe from the surface and then dive back down again. They may be as many as 10 years old. Fabulous life cycle.
So they keep their gilled, and then the F stage, they have lungs, and then they keep their lungs.
No, they keep their lungs all the way through. And that's why even when they return to the pond, they're coming up to the surface for air. They're not breathing through their skin like the other organisms.
Episodes, check out my Eastern Newt or Red Spotted Newt playlist for more detail on these organisms. You can see
So the only consistency is it's called the red-spotted newt. The only consistency, the thing that they never lose, are these spots. And they're kind of like a half-moon black with a yellow, or reddish, or orange, and not partially colorblind, so I don't really know, but a bright color on the inside. And you can compare this one here is starting that metamorphosis to go back to the pond, and it's losing the bright orange or yellow color, and it's becoming darker green on the surface. And look, see how its rear legs, this is a male, the rear legs are starting to swell up as compared to the F stage.
There's a variation in color, and I'm wondering if that color difference is not, might be a first or second year red eft, while as this one may be getting ready to return to the pond, because it's getting a much darker color, and you can see that its belly is starting to turn yellow, which is much more similar to the adults that live in the water. So you kind of have to wonder, what are all these salamanders, these red F stage of the eastern newt, doing walking around in the woods in the middle of the day with seeming impunity? Well, this terrestrial stage is actually protected by a neurotoxin they have in their skin called tetrodotoxin. And this toxin is one of the most powerful emetics they are. So furthermore, these organisms display the fact that they're dangerous.
So an emetic is a substance that makes you vomit. And so there's been I've seen some videos where they fed a blue jay a salamander, and he begins to vomit almost immediately after ingestion. So these redback salamanders, they're walking around, because they've got this bright coloration. And we've learned to avoid things that are black and orange or yellow and black, like a yellow jacket. There's a monarch butterfly with a black and orange color. Monarch butterflies are toxic because they've been feeding on milkweed. And there's so many examples of that coloration in nature. And it's just so funny that these salamanders, while all the other salamanders are hiding, these guys are walking around on the forest floor. I find them frequently, crossing these Jeep trails and stuff on my property.
And they're bad tasting by this bright orange color. And that in biology is called aposematism. So these newts can just go out and walk around by day. When I look for salamanders, I'm usually flipping over rocks or logs or turning things over and looking underneath things to find them, because they're almost always hiding. And because those salamanders, many of them breathe through their skin. And if you breathe through your skin, you've got to keep it moist. You've got to keep it from drying out. You need to shelter from sunlight, and you need to stay in moist places. Well, these salamanders are really well adapted to the terrestrial environment, and they can go anywhere they want because they're lung breathing, and it's amazing when you pick one up and hold it in your hand, it just doesn't feel like a salamander at all. The salamanders I have picked up are generally pretty wet and pretty slimy. I read some studies about vertebrates that tried to eat a red eft, and the mouth action and the clear distaste and vomiting that occurs immediately after trying to eat one or sample one or swallow it was very, very dramatic. Very, very powerful toxins. In fact, the neurotoxin is very similar to the one in pufferfish, which is an interesting little side bit. The red eft is strictly a carnivore. It may eat smaller salamanders, slugs, springtails, small insects, snails, virtually any invertebrate or vertebrate that's small enough to eat and swallow, they're going to eat it. They play a huge role in the ecology of the forest floor and the leaf litter just by their sheer numbers. There have been times here on my property following a thunderstorm where there's so many. We've seen hundreds on a single half-mile trail through the woods, and it got to the point where we had to watch each step to make sure we didn't step on them. So for some reason, they all started moving at the same time, and it was absolutely spectacular. Down here along this creek, I've got this fantastically moss-covered trail. And it's not surprising that I often find the newts or red Fs walking here because they contrast so well against the green background. And of course, this makes for a really fantastic photo opportunity as well. And again, holding one of these in your hand, boy, it's nothing like it. It's just completely different than any other salamander you've ever picked up. Just a completely different feel. Their skin actually feels almost scaly in comparison to other salamanders. And it kind of has a rough texture to it as well. So this is essentially my backyard where I live here. I have a house on the top of a hill at 2,700 feet in the Appalachian Mountains of Southwest Virginia. And this is red F habitat. They like this deciduous woodland. They also get into some mixed pine as well. And they will spend 3 to 5, maybe longer years foraging through this environment as a red F. These Fs will always return to the body of water in which they came from. Sometimes they'll breed in still water of small streams like this, but more often than not, they'll breed in ponds. I would venture to guess that 90% of the red Fs that I've found on my land probably came from this pond.
There's my cabin that I first built. And then I built a house on the property. Being a high school biology teacher, I would have summers off, and thanks to my 9th grade shop teacher in New Jersey who taught me to use a saw and a hammer, it changed my life, because I built all 3 of my houses myself. My last house, I designed it on graph paper, took my graph paper up to the Floyd building inspector, got my permit, and went to town on it. And I was working some days after school. I'd go up there at 4, work till 9, eat dinner, get up, go back to school in the morning. It's very rewarding for me. So I think it's a good kind of draw it together here. I hope you really comprehend the complexity of that eastern newt life cycle. A lot of people aren't aware of it at all. I welcome you to peruse my channel. I've got all sorts of things. So here's playlists, and I got playlists on diamondback, timber rattlesnakes, on wildflowers, like I said, I climb around the world, New Zealand, Africa. I've climbed 15 of the highest peaks in France, Italy, and stuff like that. Turtles, snakes, and my claim to fame is I have the #1 most, and I'm most embarrassed to tell you this, I have the #1 most watched stink bug video in the world. Mine is #1. Second is a video of stink bugs by National Geographic. Third most is by Animal Planet. With this, I level the playing field between me and National Geographic and Animal Planet. It's really great. I got, this is the S23, fantastic fun.
It's like the stink bug cam.
Amazing stuff. Almost everything. I've got some expensive cameras and stuff too that I bought because I've made over 50 grand from YouTube. It's crazy. A lot of people want to know, well, do you make money from that? Since I started, and all I do is produce nature videos. I do a new video every Saturday morning at 9 o'clock comes out, and I've done it consistently for 5 years, never miss a Saturday. And YouTube does all the advertising and stuff. One of the most fun parts, when I was coaching, you know, we're all about team jerseys and the Radford Bobcat logo and all that kind of stuff. Well, I got my own, and the kids call it merch. Yeah, I got T-shirts and sweatshirts and cups and hats, and all that kind of stuff. I also have the, and I'm kind of proud of this, except I don't think it's a very good video. I have the #1 most watched video on black rat snakes in America. It's got 1.1 million views right now, and it's still growing. So that means that when people find a black rat snake and they Google it, my video is usually the first one to come up, and they watch that. It's called 5 Things Everyone Should Know About Black Rat Snakes. And I love those snakes, by the way. So, any questions? Oh, I have to ask you something. Where do you live? I live in the Appalachian Mountains, one of the most diverse ecosystems in the world. Okay? All right? And I would make my kids say it's very important today to have a sense of place. Be proud of where you live. Recognize that you live in one of the most special, diverse ecosystems in the world. This is a place that I choose to be my home base and stuff. So thank you so much for letting me share with you. I love sharing. I could have talked till 4 o'clock and still kept going. Any closing questions? Anything you'd like to ask me? And I'll hang around. You can talk to me personally too if you like. Yeah.
So does that salamander have no predators at all?
Kind of not. But a lot of animals will scoop it up, fight it. You know, it's not like a 100%, but it's very effective. Probably most of the predation occurs in the young stage, and it's weird. You know, some of the local boys will look at this and go, "Oh, you mean spring lizards?" And they're great for fishing. And I cannot picture putting a hook through a salamander. You know, and they go, "Oh, that's the best fish bait." And it's confusing to me as a biologist because most of the salamanders are toxic, but I don't know if it's toxic to the fish species or not. But you know, you go to any tackle supply shop and they've got plastic salamanders, you know, that people call spring lizards. Yeah.
Do we have a lot of endangered salamanders in the area?
I kind of feel like they're almost all endangered, but we have a lot of rare ones. One of the species I want to do is go back up to Mount Rogers Naturalist Rally, and do a feature on the Yanalusi salamander that's up there. That's very rare. I also I have to finish this video. So it's beautiful. One of my blessings in my life is to be able to continue to follow up with my students and know them, and I'm not gonna lie, Facebook has helped me, you know, keep that connection. And one of my students called me up and said, "Frank, you gotta look at this." He found an albino salamander up in the mountains behind Pulaski. So he showed it to me. I took photos. I connected with Radford University. It was the first ever Blue Ridge 2-line salamander to ever be found in Pulaski County. And we published a paper in the local herpetological society about it. So one of my students from biology 2, he has his name on a publication with me and 3 university professors in a professional science journal, because this amelanistic salamander was so rare for some reason, and maybe because they're too easily found by predators and eaten, but it was like one of the rarest things ever to be seen in the state of Virginia. So it's really fun.
I got one point that you talking about the mud zone on the dirt. You said not to pick it up, it will change the directions, that you won't know where it's at. Is that what, right?
Yeah, I mean, you gotta try it. It's a judgment call. You don't want to leave them out in the road. You gotta
But
kind
I
of
know
think.
if you set them over, you moving them around, they won't know what the direction that you?
No, is you take them like a couple miles away.
Oh, you got that.
People go, oh, this isn't a good place. The turtle, there's all these trees, there's all these cars and roads here. I'll take them to, a natural, state forest. And usually misplaced animals don't have a very good survival rate at all, very low survival rate. So, yeah.
So the red F, would you say they're in third phase, so they usually just lay their eggs there?
Yeah, it's in the third phase. And in fact, I have a video on that about reproduction of the newts and their behaviors, and I filmed them in my pond. And it's an amazing thing to see. Another video would be a good follow-up to this. The male will grasp the female around the neck with his rear legs like this. And then he'll turn and take his tail and wave it in front of her nose like this as he releases pheromones for her to, it's crazy. And then the male, fish when they reproduce, a female will lay eggs on the bottom like salmon, and then the male swims over it and drops the mobile sex cells, and they swim to the eggs and fertilize them. The male newt drops, and this doesn't seem like anything, takes the whole fun out of everything. They drop the packet of sperm or sex cells in a packet on the pond floor. The female picks it up with her mouth and inserts it into her cloaca.
So they're breeding in your pond. Do they breed in those creeks that run here?
For me, I'm mostly breeding in my pond. I can find hundreds of newts in my pond. Hundreds.
You created the pond?
But I created the pond.
Okay, I was curious about that.
So I created this whole thing. I also go by like these aluminum roofing places and buy aluminum roofing and then throw it down in different places in my property, and they're great places to pick up. I have a video about creating amphibian habitat in your yard. One last thing, so I can just keep going. Field of dreams, build it and they will come.
Right.
So I got a 150-gallon plastic black tub at Home Depot and stuck it in the ground and filled it with water from my hose. And now every year I have wood frogs coming and laying eggs there, and tadpoles. And wood frogs will always return to the place they were born to lay eggs. So I created this whole ecosystem based on my field of dreams. I put in the tub, and after a year or two, I also had green frogs doing it. Wood frogs are going to be the first amphibians you're going to hear around here. They sound like little chickens clucking, very funny sound. And then the toads will be breeding. And I've got really great videos about the wood frogs, the toads, the green frogs, bullfrogs, and it's a whole sequence in the spring that unfolds, one species, and the spring peepers. And so if you want to learn more about the amphibians, check that stuff out. Thank you so much for coming here and sharing